Har Gow. They're sort of crystal prawn dumpling. I call them crystal because you can see through the pastry. It's that sort of translucent in colour. You should be able to see the prawns and whatever else you put inside, you know, a few greens and spring onion and coriander in there. Great dim sum. If you want to learn dim sum, here's how. So welcome back to Wok Wednesday. I'm Jeremy from School of Wok in Covent Garden, and this is how you make Har Gow. We're going to start with finely chopping up your base ingredients for your filling. Simple stuff. Finely chopped garlic, spring onion, and a little bit of coriander if you like it. Next up, the prawns. And you'll see here, this tray doesn't quite look like prawns because they're underneath, just sort of drying underneath these kitchen paper. And you want them to be as dry as possible so that it doesn't sort of wet the inside of the pastry too much. And we're going to make some prawn mince out of these. I'm going to use half of the prawns to really mince up, and then the other half of the prawns I'll keep a little bit more whole, and I'll show you how we do that. The first thing is, with a Chinese cleaver, it's great for just bashing fibrous things like prawns or lemongrass. Bring them together and then roughly chop them. And there, within a few seconds, you've got your prawn mince. That can go in along with my chopped up ingredients for my filling. And then the other prawns here, we're keeping them whole, but I'm going to bash them again, but slightly lighter this time. And that just allows them to be sort of a bit more flexible, and I'm going to try and get one whole prawn into each dumpling. Now the prawns have got sort of flavour, a lot of flavour to them anyway, but you want to just sort of season this quite simply with some salt, some pepper, and a little bit of sesame oil. I'm also going to add a spoon corn flour into this, and I'm going to give that a good mix through. And again, that corn flour is just there to kind of suck up any excess moisture from the prawns. My filling there is done. Onto the flours and the dough. Now, Har Gow, or these sort of crystal prawn dumplings, the pastry of them is said to be one of the hardest dim sum doughs to make, or dumpling doughs to make. But my recipe here has 3 different types of flours. So I've got some wheat starch, which will give the dough that sort of whitish colour, and then the same amount of tapioca starch, and it almost has this kind of jelly-like structure to it, so it's quite gelatinous. And then I've got about 20 grams of corn starch or corn flour. So that's my flour mix, well mixed there. The next thing about this dough, that the water needs to be boiling hot before I add it to the flour. If I don't get that initial cooking process, then my dough will just become more chalky and sort of fall apart. Another little trick here is that I like to weigh my water out. So I'm going to go for about 220 mils or 220 grams of hot water, and then give that a good mix straight away. And that sort of instant cooking of the dough forms this sort of paste. Once you've got that paste, then you can start to bring it together, but this is where you have to almost have asbestos hands, and you kind of press it in and bring that together into a ball of dough. So you have to work quite quickly with the palms of your hand. And then once it's combined, you're safe, you're okay at this point. So long as it's not chalky, you've done a good job. So I'm just making a few sort of divots into the dough here. And then I'm going to take some oil and put that oil into the divots. You want to press that oil into the dough, and this is where it starts to create a more sort of smooth texture of dough. And you can see now the elasticity of this gluten-free pastry is amazing. You don't need to knead it too much. As long as you've got a nice smooth pastry, then you can shape it into a ball. And I'd recommend either getting some cling film or a food bag and wrapping that up to keep it nice and moist. Now, traditionally, when you're rolling out a Har Gow pastry, dim sum chefs would use a knife and press just with a little bit of oil over each piece of dough to create this perfectly round dough. I'm going to show you the everyday dumpling way to roll out your pastry, but I'd highly recommend when you're doing this to go bit by bit and just take a small bit of dough at a time so that it doesn't all dry out too quickly, especially when you're practicing. So we're gonna cut good chunks, half a thumb. Now, once you've got your chunks of dough, then flour the surface, press down, and then your spokes to your wheel, index finger twisting the dough, and then pushing in with the rolling pin to get that nice thin pastry that has a slight hump in the middle of that pastry. That hump there helps to protect the dough from breaking. So once you've done your 9, 10 pastries, and you want to sit that prawn in the center of your pastry, like so. And I'm going to show you the classic Har Gow fold, which starts with sort of sitting your pastry up, almost like a taco, and it sits in your fingertips, or the bed of your fingertips, like so. Your left thumb can sit inside that taco, and you just pinch the outer edge of your pastry. I'm going to push my right index finger towards my left to make a pleat. And at that point, you pick up your right index finger and pinch the outside of that pleat. Now, I'm going to do that again, but each time I pleat, I'm going to put one pleat directly on top of the other. And you want to get as many pleats as possible into this dumpling without breaking your pastry, which you'll find is quite delicate. Once you're pretty much all the way across, take your pastry, sit it sort of more on its side, and then use your right index finger to sit underneath the lip of what I call the unhappy goldfish. Once it's sitting on the lip, then you close the edge with your thumb and squeeze that together and give it a little twist, and then pull that gently across. And you can see then these beautiful pleats spread across my dumpling pastry. Once you've got those pleats, if you want to neaten it up, then you can just cut across that pastry like so. And I've got my first Har Gow, my first prawn dumpling. So you want to repeat that time and time again. Practice makes perfect. So you cover them with a lid, and then I've got my wok with sort of halfway filled with water, boiling away, now on a high steam, 8 minutes. After 8 minutes, you want to switch the hob off, and I'd actually always recommend to just let your dumplings sit in the steam for a couple of minutes before you take the lid off or move them. And you'll see when you lift them off how beautiful this is and how so clear each one of those pastries are, and they've kind of just tightened up from that extra minute or two of sitting. Now I've taken the nicest ones out for a photo, but we're going to taste this. It's so delicate and so delicious. You get all the natural flavors of the prawn, a good sort of bite around the pastry, even though it's such a sort of smooth and sensitive pastry. And that bite comes from that corn flour that's gone into, the dough. Not the simplest Wok Wednesday, but certainly interesting. And I'm hoping that you guys will have lots of questions about this. So if you do, give us your questions in the comments below. And don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, ding, hit that notification bell for more interesting recipes just like this.